There's so much to learn from life and our experiences. Oftentimes we think learning takes place from books, or learning takes place in a classroom, or learning takes place from teachers who are delivering information to you. But actually, life's biggest teacher and life's most persistent teacher and perhaps life's most powerful teacher is our own experiences. But how many people take the time to deeply look back on their experiences and draw the lessons that these experiences are giving us to live a much more purposeful and powerful life moving forward?
I'll really like to welcome once more His Holiness S.B. Keshava Swami. Thank you so much
for accepting
our invitation.
Thank you so much. I think I've got the lapel here. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Can you hear me okay? Yes. Wonderful, wonderful. So it's really an honor to be with all of you. I came to America as a child in 1994 and haven't been back since. So it's been wonderful just to travel over different cities, meet many different people, and we've been sharing spiritual wisdom. We've been discussing wellness, how to find balance on all levels of our lives in different audiences and forums. And today we'll be doing exactly that. We've had some wonderful events at Intel. The very first event I did with Intel was entitled Becoming Comfortable with the Uncomfortable. And it was insightful discussion, and I think we had lots of takeaways. And then last week we were at Phoenix, and there we had a beautiful discussion on the monk mindset. I don't think anyone in the audience was convinced to become a monk after that talk, but they definitely took away many insights of how the monks live and how some of those principles can apply in their lives today. So we welcome all of you and really thank you for taking the time. Today will be very interactive. I'll try and have you do some exercises. I'll try to hopefully ignite some thoughts within all of you. And then we'll also have some time at the end to field some questions and see what points of discussion may be coming up in your hearts and minds. So I wanted to begin today with a small experiment, and this experiment is maybe an experiment that some of you have done before. So if you have done this experiment, then my humble request is don't give away all the answers. And for those of you who, while doing this experiment, have moments where you feel like you just want to say something or express something, I request you just to keep those emotions within you. And I hope this will help us to lead into today's conversation, which is all about looking back to look forward. So we welcome everyone. Please take your seat. I'm going to show something up here on the screen. And it's a very simple exercise. There will be 6 people on the screen. 3 of them will be in white t-shirts. And they will be passing a ball around. And your task for today is a very simple task. All I'm asking you to do is watch the screen. You've got a nice big screen here. You couldn't wish for something bigger. And all I'm asking you to do is count the number of times they pass the ball to each other. Simple enough? Yeah. Are you ready? Okay. Remember, please control your emotions during the video.
The monkey business illusion. Count how many times the players wearing white pass the ball.
Try to concentrate, look closely. Okay, simple enough. Okay, 1 second. I'll field questions and say, can I ask you all to stand up? And can I ask you to sit down if you've done this experiment before? Okay. Can I ask you, put your hand up if you counted 14? Okay. Can you sit down? Put your hand up if you counted 15. Okay. Can you sit down? Put your hand up if you counted 17. Okay. Can you sit down? Put your hand up if you counted any other number apart from 16. Oh, wow. Okay. Sit down. Okay. So just stay where you are. Stay standing. They passed the ball 16 times. That's our first lesson for today. Sometimes even to concentrate on how much is happening before us is so difficult. But a round of applause to all of you. You managed to do it. However, yeah, you can give them a round of applause. Why not? Now I'm going to ask you the question. Put your hand up if you saw the gorilla. And sit down if you didn't see the gorilla. Okay. So believe it or not, for those of you that didn't see it, a gorilla went across the screen. Yeah, a gorilla went across the screen. For those of you still standing up, did you notice anything else happen? Did you notice any other change in the scenery? Put your hand up if you saw the whole color of the scene change. No. Sit down if you didn't put your hand up. Okay, so that's basically everyone. So thanks for doing that experiment. This is a social experiment which actually shows the power of distraction. I'll just show you. Oh, sorry. Just fast forward here.
The monkey business illusion.
Just have a look again.
Count how many times the players wearing white pass the ball.
Just look at the video and ask yourself, what do you think it was that distracted you? Just have those thoughts in your mind. And then it's going to rewind and we're going to see. See if you can spot the gorilla. See it now? This experiment is used to show that many things happen.
The correct answer is 16 passes.
But we're oblivious to it.
Did you spot the gorilla? For people who haven't seen or heard about a video like this before, about half missed the gorilla. If you knew about the gorilla, you probably saw it. But did you notice the curtain changing color or the player on the black team leaving the game?
Let's rewind and watch it again. Here comes the gorilla, and there goes a player, and the curtain is changing from red to gold. The monkey business illusion.
So I just want you to think about that as we begin our talk today, which is all about looking back to look forward. There's a sense in which so much happens in life, so much is happening before our eyes, but because of the busyness of life, because our mind and our consciousness is splayed in so many ways, because of the noises and the disturbances around us, there's actually so much happening that we're not aware, attentive, and conscious of. And that's actually a very, very profound insight. I'll share something else with you. Anyone know who this is? This is Joshua Bell. He's actually one of the most famous musicians in the world, one of the best violinists. He's known to play some of the most intricate pieces of music. And these violins that he's playing, sometimes they've been auctioned in excess of $2 or $3 million. He's a sought-after musician. This is Joshua Bell playing at a concert in Boston. It was a sellout crowd, I think something like 10 or 20,000 people, and each of them paid $100 to watch him play the violin that evening. Joshua Bell did something interesting the very next day. What he decided to do is get changed out of his smart clothes, wear a baseball cap, go with his violin into the subway. And what he did in rush hour is he began playing the violin. This is basically what he did. For 1 hour. This is Joshua Bell, whose violin was auctioned for $2 million and who over 10 or 20,000 people the night before had paid $100 to watch. That same Joshua Bell was playing on the subway for all the public to see. And you know the amazing thing? In 1 hour of playing on the subway, in rush hour, about 7 people stopped to watch him. And of those 7, about 5 gave a donation which amounted to about $17. We could draw many, many lessons from this. But one lesson is definitely, when we're in a rush, when there's intensity around us, and when there are many, many things going through our minds, we miss so many things around us. We miss so much of the beauty of life. We miss so much of the subtlety that can nourish us. And therefore, distraction and the inability to really be introspective and conscious is one of the biggest obstacles that people have in their life today. Today I want to do a little exercise with you, and it's going to require you to be a little introspective. I'm sure many of you have phones, so if you can just keep your phone with you in your hand for a second. Each of us have a life journey. In your mind, you can just think right now of the first memory in your life. What's the earliest memory in your life you can think about? And then I want you to think about your current situation, where you are now. That's a long journey. For some of you, it's a 20, 30, 40, 50-year journey maybe, between these 2 points. And between these 2 points in your life, many, many things have happened. What I'm going to ask you to do for the next 2 or 3 minutes, and I'm just going to give you some music to help you to just get into a bit more of a reflective state. And you don't need to talk to anyone. It's just really your own internal meditation. And try to be with me on this one. What I want you to do on your phone is just write down the 3 biggest turning points in your life. Right? As you look back at your life, from your first memory to where you are now, what I want you to do is write down on your phone the 3 things that happened to you which changed the course of your life. Yeah? You can close your eyes if you like and just meditate on that for a moment. What were the 3 biggest turning points in your life? what you could do is all of side most. It could be something to do with a relationship. It could be something to do with an unexpected event. It could be something to do with a chance meeting. It could be a mystical experience, a spiritual experience. Just give you a few, maybe one more minute. Okay, thank you so much. So hopefully you've got three things down there on your phone which really defines your life. Sometimes just doing that exercise is very, very powerful because we don't often take the time to think about these things, but they're actually incredibly profound. And what I'd like you to do is just, for another couple of minutes, just turn to the person next to you or just wherever you are, in twos or threes, and ask yourself the question as you look at those three things. When you were actually going through those three things, did you appreciate the importance, the pivotal nature of those things when you were actually going through them? Did you realize how defining they would be and what kind of impact they would have on your life? The second question is the emotions that you were going through when you experienced that event or that interaction or that moment. When you look back at it now, do you feel the same way about that event or that moment in your life? Or has it changed over time, the way you've framed that whole point? And the third point is, has that experience or that thing that you've gone through, has that changed the way that you approach life now? Has it given you a different way or a different lens? Or has it changed your character in any way in terms of how you approach the world now? Is that okay? So I'm just going to ask you, just with the people around you, just to have a bit of a conversation about that, and just speak with each other about those points and some of these questions and what you've learned just by, for these moments, reflecting on those turning points in your life. Is that okay? So I'll just give you a few minutes to do that. Don't be shy. Please engage with each other. Tell him to take a mic around to get people's feedback, or you can, or someone else. Okay, I'll just ask you all to come back. See if we can get your attention. We're just going to come round with a mic and just hear a little bit from all of you. Perhaps you had some insights or some ideas based on these questions about your past, the things that happen, how they've made you who you are, the emotions surrounding it. Would anyone like to share any of the kind of thoughts or some of the points that came out of your conversations about past events in our life and how they define who we are now, and just your internal method of processing all of it? Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I would like to share. So my dad passed away about 23 years ago, and I was 24 at the time. So I took it, I was pretty young, starting out my career. So I was pretty sad at that time and, spent a couple of years getting over it. But looking back, I think if I'd known better, I would have just made the best out of that time and not be that emotional. Because I think my dad probably didn't want me to be, sad about it anyway, so.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, oftentimes when we look back at our past and we see how we emotionally responded to things and how those emotional responses then drove our trajectory in a certain way, we look back and we think, there was the event, but really it was my emotional response to the event that took my life trajectory in a certain way, not necessarily the event itself. And therefore, sometimes we look back and we learn how to better emotionally respond to certain things that happened, because oftentimes we think it's the things that happen to us. But when we look back, we're actually gaining some clarity that it's my emotional response to it that is really what counts. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah. Anyone else have anything they'd like to share? Yes. Just got a mic coming up for you. Just for you.
Hello. I feel like the event of my kid when she was born, I feel like that changed me a lot. I became more patient. I became more selfless. I started tolerating the tantrums because when she was inside her mother's womb, I did not feel the presence. But as soon as she was born, I started feeling that, I have more responsibilities. I think that matured me a lot. Before that, I did not feel like I have so many responsibilities on my shoulder. But I feel like right now, I have more things to do for her than me. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, the new arrival of someone in your life. They say the best alarm clock in the world is a baby. No, I'm only joking. The best alarm clock in the world is purpose. And when we have purpose, when we have meaning, when we have a sense of making a contribution, then naturally we become so much more driven, so much more focused, so much more enthusiastic and hungry for life. And therefore, sometimes we look back in our lives and find that there were moments in which we were infused with purpose, and how important purpose is in our journey. Thank you so much. Yes. Anyone else like to share anything about what they've learned from their life trajectory and different events that have happened? Yeah, is there someone there?
Hello, yeah. So mine was a little unique experience, similar to one of the other person who mentioned there. I lost my mom in 2020 as well. 2019, I came from India to US. I was supposed to move, but I took a decision not to move at that time. I went back to India, stayed with her, and around 2020, I lost her. That was a very very difficult phase of my life. But certain things changed after that. And 21, after about 8 years, we had a birth of another child. I got a daughter, and I always feel that my mom has come back in her form. So it's like there was an event where I went through extreme sadness and I made some right decisions of not coming here and staying back with her in India. At the same time, I had a gift of a newborn daughter again, and I always feel that she's come back in her form. So it's like kind of for two sides of the coin. There's always a good and a bad, and probably I wouldn't really call bad. It's like sad and sorrow, but at the same time, you also have happiness, right? And kind of resonate to the other person said, after she was born, things have changed a lot, and and then we moved back here, and it's been a kind of a different journey. So yeah, it has been a kind of one of the experiences I thought I'll share with the larger group. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for sharing. Yeah, life is dynamic. When we look at the line of our life I was showing you here, sometimes we come to points in our life where we feel like it's a dead end, or there's no future like this, or life will never be the same. But what I often tell people is, yeah, we come to points in life where things happen and we say life will never be the same, but life can still be beautiful. And therefore, there's always a future. There's always something new on the horizon. When one door closes, another 5 open up. When one chapter ends, it signifies the beginning of a new one. And when one opportunity seems to slip away, then maybe there's a bigger thing that's on the horizon. The reason I'm doing this exercise with you is there's so much to learn from life and our experiences. Oftentimes we think learning takes place from books, or learning takes place in a classroom, or learning takes place from teachers who are delivering information to you. But actually, life's biggest teacher and life's most persistent teacher, and perhaps life's most powerful teacher, is our own experiences. But how many people take the time to deeply look back on their experiences and draw the lessons that these experiences are giving us to live a much more purposeful and powerful life moving forward? What happens in our life is there are visible events, but beneath every visible event is an invisible purpose. And the interesting thing is, in the moment of that event, we can't often see the invisible purpose. But once we've moved on and we're out of the emotional chaos of that time and we look back with a steadier consciousness, we can often decipher what the invisible purpose is and become very, very wise. And so this concept of looking back to move forward is so important in living a progressive life. Social scientists, what they say is between the age of 0 and 25, age and wisdom correlate. So that makes sense. Generally, an 18-year-old will be more wise than an 11-year-old, or a 21-year-old will be more wise than a 15-year-old. What they say, social scientists, is that when it comes to this first 25 years of your life, wisdom and age are correlating. The interesting thing is, from 25 to 75, they say there's no correlation between wisdom and age. In other words, just because you're 70, it doesn't mean you're wiser than a 30-year-old. That's a very interesting point. And the reason they mention is that in the first 20 years of our life, we're basically becoming more wise through an educational system. They're the formative years of our life. But at the age of 25, you finish that formal education, unless you decide to do like 3 PhDs or something. And therefore, between the age of 25 and 75, how do we learn? What do we learn from? Experience. But is it just experience? Because a 70-year-old has more experiences than a 30-year-old. So that would mean that a 70-year-old is necessarily more wise than a 30-year-old. So it can't just be experience which is making you more wise. Experience that has been reflected upon. Experience that we've actually deeply taken the time to analyze and look back on. And therefore, what often happens in life is they say most people physically die after 75, but practically they're already dead by the time they're 30. Because there's no more learning, there's no more growth, there's no more evolution, there's no more advancement of their understanding of life, understanding of themselves, understanding of the purpose of why we're here. Most people just stagnate because what happens is the busyness of life hijacks us and stops us from doing that deep work of looking back to move forward. And so one of the most powerful life skills is this ability to make space in one's life to actually draw from the experiences that they've gone through. In the ancient teachings of the Vedas, the Sanskrit tradition of ancient India, there's a book called Ayurveda, which is all about the science of health and life. And when it comes to eating, the Ayurvedic texts say half of your stomach should be filled with solids. A quarter of your stomach should be filled with fluids. And the other quarter of your stomach should be filled with sweets. No, I'm only joking. The other quarter should be filled with air. Air. And all of us know what happens when you eat so much that there's no air. There's no space. There's no room for the fire of digestion to take place because we've basically overloaded it. And therefore, we've eaten so much, but practically we don't get the nourishment. We don't get the energy. We don't get the feeling of vitality and upliftment from that food because we haven't left any space to digest it. But now think about life. And ask ourselves the question, how much air, how much space, how much room have I left in my life to deeply draw on the lessons and the experiences that are being made available to me? And so one of the most beautiful things about life is the ability to look back and reflect on life, to introspect. Introspection is something that most people don't do nowadays. Introspection is somewhat of a lost art. Reflection is almost like, just something you think about as, an image in a mirror or something. That's what people think of as a reflection. But some people often ask the question, how do I know that I'm not overthinking? Because that can also be a problem. Some people think that they're thinking a lot, but they're not getting much from it. And other people don't think at all. But introspection stands in the middle of both of those extremes. When we introspect, we look at everything we're going through in life, but we see it through a deeper lens. We're not just discussing people. We're not just thinking about people and events, but we're looking at things through a deeper reference point. They say small minds discuss people, average minds discuss events, but great minds discuss wisdom. Because through the lens of wisdom teachings, it almost acts like an X-ray machine to help us draw deeper lessons that are available. When we overthink, it's just thoughts, it's just mental energy, it's just gymnastics in the mind. But when we actually introspect, then what it will do is it will lead to tangible outcomes. When we introspect, we find lessons because we're actually looking. Some people, they look back at their past and they say, why did that happen to me? Frustrated. But other people, they look back in their life and they say, what can I learn from that? It's not that everything that happened in my life was good, but it is that something good can come from everything that happened in my life. And so when we introspect, rather than getting into a mental frustration, we feel actually intellectual upliftment because we're looking for lessons. Introspection can also be accompanied by consultation to get ideas and inputs from other people who can help you to decipher what those insights are. And overall, introspection is progressive and empowering, whereas overthinking is negative and limiting. So what we're sharing with all of you today is just the opportunity to take these 3 events of your life, even if you just took those 3. And what you could do this evening is you could go home and you could ask yourself, what are the 5 lessons I learned from these 3 things that happened in my life? And then you'd have 15 lessons by which you could then move forward in your life, helping you to gain a different vision and a better way and a better insight into how to drive your trajectory going forward. In the ancient Sanskrit literatures, it actually goes even one step further. In the ancient tradition of the East, there's the concept of karma. Karma is a very, very interesting concept. Everyone's heard of it. The concept that everything that happens is meaningful. Everything that happens for a purpose, that nothing is random, nothing is by chance. And therefore, according to this teaching, a teaching which is found in many spiritual traditions, it's not just that we can learn lessons from everything that happens, but it means that specifically everything that happens is meant to happen. And everything that happens is specifically tailored for our upliftment and elevation. And it's a very fascinating concept, karma, and how we then decode the karma that we have and find those insights. I want to ask you, just moving forward, and we'll just come around with the mic and see what ideas you may have. Here we are talking about reflecting on life experiences and drawing that kind of those lessons. But if I were to ask you practically, how do you think we can reflect? What activities can we do? Maybe some of you are already doing this. What activities do you do, or what tools do we have at our disposal to draw the lessons from our past? Can you give me any ideas? Okay, over here. Do we have a mic?
It could be something very simple. Like at the end of the day, I look back at the day that passed and then say, okay, did I manage to do what I wanted to do today? And okay, so this is where I wasted time. This is what I did. Okay, let me try to do something different tomorrow.
Amazing. Yeah. So just writing down a daily log and just some insights from that. Very good. Yeah. What other ways do you think, or what other tools or practices can we use to look back in our lives and draw lessons?
Maybe a little bit related to that, but I know one of the things I do is I like to go on long bike rides, like 4 or 5 hours. And you could do the same analogy for hiking, but some sort of long period of time when you're maybe sort of outside or in nature a little bit. It's a great time to reflect, I find.
Yeah.
And it's a long sort of uninterrupted sort of period of time where you can, like say, go through that retrospection. And I find that very, very helpful.
Yeah, that's an amazing point. I really took 2 points from there. One is the concept of extended reflection. That oftentimes what happens is if we try to draw lessons in a very clinical or a very a forced way, that, okay, I've got 20 minutes here, I need to learn everything in this 20 minutes and then move on, it may not happen. Sometimes we have to be able to sit with our thoughts for long periods of time, and it may feel as though nothing's coming, no insights are being revealed to our heart, but we have to go through that process, and as we dig deeper and deeper and deeper, then we begin to realize many things that are hidden within deeper spaces of our subconscious. And the other thing I really like that you said is that oftentimes to reflect on our life, we need to come out of our normal habitat. Oftentimes it's said that location carries energy. So when you enter into, or when you're surrounded by a certain environment, it's very hard to shift your way of thinking because you're just so controlled by that energy. And so oftentimes it helps to just go outside of our normal habitat to ignite a more creative type of thinking. Thank you so much for sharing.
So we also have about 150 plus participants joining us online. So some of them have responded saying that journaling, meditation, drawing, music, writing, all of these help introspect to be able to draw lessons from the past.
Beautiful. Yes, yes, music. Music is also an interesting one. Just here when I was doing the exercise with you, I put on some music, and I think it helped because sometimes we need to also avail of things that help us to relax and help us to disconnect from the busy thoughts. We need to clear some room from the busyness of the immediate pressures in order to find something deeper. Very nice. And there was a last one in the room? Yeah.
So even having a deeper discussion with other family members or friends, because sometimes some of the discussion prompts you in terms of similar situation that you may have gone through, and you may not had a time to reflect, and now you have even a lot more time to think about how it impacted you, how it changed you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Yeah, just having deeper conversations with people. As I say, small minds discuss people, average minds discuss events. And so much of our conversation almost with others is just on the surface level, the people, the events, the things going on. But when we can find people who we can have conversations with, who we say, yeah, this is the surface level, but what are the deeper things behind this that we need to learn? And when you have those kind of conversations, then in that dynamic exchange, so many epiphanies can come up. So yeah, here we are just giving you some ideas of different types of reflection and introspection that you can do. And today I'll just share one with you that's been very powerful for me, and just to offer you as something you may want to think about. For the last 25 years, I became a monk when I was 21, and 2 or 3 years before that, I had begun a serious study of spiritual wisdom traditions. And at that time, at the age of 18, I started writing a journal, started documenting my events, things that I was experiencing, and different things of what I was learning from all of those occurrences in my life. And what I found is that people often think of writing as a way to express their thoughts to others. But actually, what I found through journaling is that writing is an incredible way to discover your own thoughts. I would often write in my journal, and as I was writing and I was editing my words, it felt like I was editing my own consciousness. I would put the entirety of my mind down on the paper before me, and then I would see it in front of me, and just looking at those words and organizing them helped me to organize my own thoughts and my own insights. And so this is a very nice quote from the person who wrote the biography of Thomas Merton, who was known as a very introspective, reflective Christian Catholic monk. His most vital writing is private, what he did for himself, because he made constant notes to help clarify things for himself. He thought and sought to express experience on paper as a self-guide, rather than to reveal anything. He sought to get rid of the role, to flee the role of the monk in order to become the monk. To be, and not merely to appear to be. These are the great, profound differences which few perceive even in the religious life. I really like this line he says, that he sought to get rid of the role, to flee the role of the monk in order to become the monk. Oftentimes what happens in the world is we're kind of steeped in inauthenticity because we're playing so many roles in the world, but then we lose sight of who we are, what journey we're meant to be on, what lies deep within us. One person, he says, I'm not who I think I am. I'm not who you think I am. I'm who I think you think I am. And that's often how disconnected we've become from our own real self. Sometimes we feel I have desires, I have thoughts, I have these goals, I have these aspirations. But actually, are they really coming from us? Have we really done that internal work to find ourselves? They say the worst type of success is when you achieve all of your goals and then you realize they were somebody else's goals. And that's often what happens. So journaling is such a powerful tool. In spiritual traditions, they talk about different aspects to our identity. And this is a model which is kind of universal across traditions. The idea that we are spiritual beings, a spark of consciousness, something metaphysical. In this diagram, I've called it the soul. And we also have intelligence. And this is almost like our higher reflective self. And then there is the mind, the immediate pushings of the mind and the senses and the agitations and then the stimuli from the outer world. And what often happens is there's a disconnect because there's a sense in which we have a higher intelligence, higher aspirations, higher thoughts, but then we have this immediate, real experience in the human world. And sometimes they don't actually match because people often find that they act in ways which are not congruent with their higher aspirations. But journaling is a great way to bring these two aspects of ourself into communion. Sometimes what I tell people, journaling is a confession from yourself to yourself. Because what happens is it gives us an opportunity to look at our lives, to look at how we're acting, to look at what we're doing, and then to also bring in our higher thoughts, our higher aspirations, our higher insights, and then bring those two things together to elevate our consciousness. And so, I encourage all of you to try to do this. When you journal, when you write down, you can be honest. What is inspiring you? What's interesting you? What's scaring you? You can use it as an opportunity to clarify your thoughts, solidify what you already know. It's interesting that often I would write, and what it would help me to do is solidify what I already knew. Because there's something about writing it down and thinking about it and articulating it on paper that helps to instill it within a deeper space in your consciousness. In a journal, you can write observations of the day, observations of oneself. How did I carry myself? What were my emotional reactions? What aspects of my character enthused me? What aspects of my character do I need to work on? We can have observations of the world. There's so much we can learn from the world around us, how people are, how events transpire. And then there are observations of divinity. Did we feel spiritual connection? Did we feel something beyond just the material, immediate situation? And as we do this type of journaling and looking back in our life, it really, really empowers our journey forward. I'll just conclude today's presentation with this final 5 points that I'd like to share with you that I've found from trying to be reflective in my life. That the first thing the first gift of looking back and being reflective is it really helps us to understand our values. When we look back and look at the way we've acted, the decisions we've made, the directions that we've taken, the way we've responded to certain situations, then what it helps us to do is deeply understand the values which we're living by. If we all asked ourselves, what are the values that you live by? I'm sure all of us could put down a few points. But then maybe if we look back at our life and see how we've acted, then we might find that although those are the values we want to live by, those are not actually the values we're currently living by. And therefore, by doing this kind of reflection, we can be more honest about the values that we have and the values that we aspire for. When we look back and do this kind of reflection through journaling, for example, it helps us to establish our strengths and our weaknesses. Most individuals, although they have some sense, are not really clear what is their psychophysical capacities and what are their psychophysical weaknesses. But when we look back and see the things that have happened to us, there's no better way to identify those things, which then help you to understand moving forward what we need to be more aware of and attentive to. By doing reflection, we understand what is our passion, what our goals are, what is moving our heart. We clarify what is my purpose, what is my meaning. And as mentioned, that understanding of our passion and purpose is what gives us the hunger for life. This is also very, very powerful. When we look back, then we can understand in what habitats we thrive and in what habitats we basically lose our capacities. Oftentimes, it's not so much that we are weak, but what we do is we expose ourselves to habitats which make us weak. And therefore, when we look back, we can see what were the kind of habitats in which I achieved amazing things? What were the kind of habitats in which I discovered amazing things? And then what we can try to do is recreate those habitats moving forward. And the final thing is that when we reflect, we better understand our own patterns of behavior, our own psychology. Someone was mentioning here about their emotional response to a situation. So when we reflect back, we can see the patterns of how I tend to respond to certain things, how my emotions tend to move from situation to situation. And that helps us to be more aware going forward that when we face such situations, how to try to alter and adjust our behaviors and emotional responses. So today I just wanted to share these thoughts with you that oftentimes the best teacher in life is our own experience. But in order to draw from that experience, we have to really create the space and energy in our life where we try to deeply reflect upon it. We talked about different ways in which we can reflect on experience. And today I specifically shared with you one technique, which is journaling. And by doing this journaling or any other reflective type of activity, these are some of the gifts that come. And when we realize these gifts in our life, then what it helps us to do is live a much more purposeful and powerful journey moving forward. And I'll conclude there. Thank you so much for your attention and for taking the time.
Thank you so much, Swamiji. I have so many reflections to take back with me. One of the most important things is to create some time and energy to reflect upon our own experiences. Sometimes we get so busy in hustle bustle, just working back things, and we need to give some time. And I thank you so much for again reminding us all these wisdom nuggets. Now is the time we'll have Q&A from 1 to 1:30, and hold on till 1:30 because we have a raffle at 1:30, and we have some volunteers who will be handing over the mic. Just you can raise your hands. We have questions online also. So get started then.
Yes, so if anyone has any reflections or questions or anything I mentioned that you may want to know more about, we'll begin in the room and then I think we can go online.
I have a comment
Yeah, sure.
and also a question which is unrelated to the comment. So the comment was when you talked about journaling, that's when I realized that there was another thing that I do on a regular basis, which is I sometimes just look in the mirror and explain something to myself. But I mostly never think about it afterwards. So in the sense that, I didn't think about it when you first asked, like, what are the tools that you use? It never came to my mind. So it's probably something. So once you mentioned journaling, that's when I started thinking about how that particular activity helped. So it's just the idea of explaining something to someone or to yourself. Then I realized that sometimes I just walk around trying to explain something to myself, just talking to myself.
Yeah,
So,
that's basically what reflection is. It's a dialogue with yourself. And remember, it's your impulsive self and your higher self, and facilitating a conversation between the two.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah. It was good to know that. And the question that I had was is some completely different. So I was just curious, like as a monk, like what are some of the texts or scriptures that you read on a daily basis? And do you go through? I mean, do you learn new things on a daily basis even after or is there like a graduation?
Yeah, when I was 15, I began reading different wisdom texts from many, many different traditions. And they all inspired me in very, very deep ways. I guess when I was 16, I came across the Bhagavad-gita, which is, an ancient Sanskrit literature, and that became perhaps the focus of my study. And over the years, I've continued interfacing with different traditions. And so, yeah, that is, I guess, my inspiration and where I draw most of my teachings from, or what I try to share with the world. But what we often were taught in the monastery is that reading is not a linear process. We often think of reading as something in which we're gathering more and more information. But what we were taught in monastic life is to read almost like a spiral. And so what we would often do is keep reading the same book, but we would read it in deeper and deeper ways to try to draw deeper and deeper insights. And my firm conviction over the years became that you don't really read a book until you read it for the third time. Because I think when you're reading something for the first time or the second time, you're just becoming familiar with it, you're just grasping somewhat of the immediate narrative. But just like I said, there are visible events and there are invisible purposes, and I think it's like that with reading, that there's an immediate narrative, but then there's deeper messages which are available for one to draw. And so generally, spiritual literature is read like that, in a very meditative, in a very prayerful way, in which we're not just trying to get more information, but we're actually looking for genuine transformation. And so we would read like that. It wasn't necessarily about reading more and more books. Like there are books now that I've read, wisdom books, which I've read perhaps more than 30 or 35 times. And I find them ever fresh because we enter that book with a different conscious state, and therefore we draw more. Hope that helps. Thank you. Yes.
Hi. First, very powerful session, so thank you for this.
Thank you.
Question is, seems like you, I don't know where you where you attended all the ashrams or took diksha or whatever, but seems like you are well-traveled and you would have come across multiple different type of people, cultures, religions, and all of that. What is your learning? Have you reflected back and really to your first memories and then you got in the teachings, and have you ever thought through that, hey, I could have done something different. There was a higher purpose in life. I should have lived a different life. And how do you deal with that?
Thank you so much. Yeah. Yeah, I think sometimes we're scared of the past, thinking about the past, because the past can bring up feelings of regret. The past can bring up feelings of inadequacy. The past can bring up feelings of missed opportunities. And so sometimes we're scared of thinking about the past. Of course, as I mentioned, I began journaling at the age of 18. And so before I had made my life decisions, I had that opportunity to really look back and think and deeply try to make conscious decisions. I feel in my life I don't have any regrets, but definitely I do have learnings, of things I could have done better, decisions I would have made differently. But I feel the major trajectory of my life has gone in the direction that I wanted to go because I did that work in the beginning. And so yeah, what can I say? I think regrets are a part of life. And sometimes we can use regrets to realize that, as I was mentioning, we were talking about here, that life never comes to a dead end. So sometimes we look back at our life, we have regrets, which is not a bad thing. But when those regrets are coupled with a feeling that my life has now hit a dead end, then it becomes very disempowering. But when we look back at our life and have regrets, but also realize that life is always dynamic and full of opportunities, and that where you are doesn't define who you are, that we always have the opportunity to say, this is not how the story is going to end. I think when we're awake to the opportunity and creativity that is available in our life, then looking back and having regrets is not such a bad thing, because it helps us to also now move forward with more wisdom. So I would say I've met many people who have had serious regrets doing this kind of reflection, but it hasn't disempowered or disenthused them, but just helped them to live much more purposeful lives. But I think because people don't have that, maybe that vision of how life can still be creative, they tend to shy away from reflecting on the past. Those are some thoughts. Yeah.
So to me, whenever I reflect on things, in the end, I come to one stop point, which is, what is the purpose of my life? And, I would think that, of course, everybody would have different purpose, right? So, if everybody had the same purpose, probably it'll be very tough in the world, right? So, then if everybody has a purpose, how do I figure mine?
Sure. That's such a great point, yeah. Yeah, everyone has their own purpose. Well, we could say universally everyone has the same purpose, which is to be happy. But then individually we all have different paths through which we'll find that happiness. We're all individual, we have individual circumstances, we've been invested with different abilities and desires and personalities, and therefore within that universal purpose to be happy are many, many individual journeys. And perhaps one of the biggest problems in the world today is because there's so much sense of comparison and competition, we're drawn into sometimes living someone else's purpose or trying to copy someone else's life. I often give the example that imagine you haven't done any revision for an exam and you end up in the exam hall and you're sitting next to the cleverest kid in the class. And you think, it must be divine arrangement. And you decide then in the exam hall to copy their answer paper to the T. And you come out of the exam hall having copied their answer paper perfectly. But then you realize coming out of the hall that everyone had a different question paper. That perhaps is speaking somewhat of our life, that we have to find our own purpose. Einstein, he says, everyone is a genius, but if you convince a fish that it has to climb a tree, it will live its whole life thinking it's a failure. So when people ask, like, how do I find my purpose? I usually give them 3 points. The first thing is analyze. Take time to deeply analyze and understand your own character. Do a personality test. Try to see, like some of these things I was saying, what this basically is become more self-aware of what you've been invested with. Just understand your capacities better. That's the first thing, analyze. And then the second thing is ask. I think this is an underrated aspect in our world today because we're generally skeptical of anyone in our life who tries to tell us anything authoritatively. But having coaches, having mentors, having people who can see you from a different perspective, they say it's difficult to see the picture when you're inside the frame. So when you ask others who you have a relationship with, who have some understanding of you, they can give you invaluable feedback, which can help you to unlock parts of your life that you may not have ventured into. And so the second thing I tell people is ask, have coaches, have mentors. It's very powerful. And then the third thing I tell people is attempt. Just try things out. Finding your purpose, finding your meaning is not just something that's done in the head. We just have to go out there in the world and try things and be brave enough to explore new opportunities and experiences. And often in that journey, we find ourselves arriving to what we're really meant to do. And so finding, yes, we each have our own meaning and our own purpose, and to find it, analyze, become very self-aware. Ask, have coaches and mentors, and attempt. Just go out there and try things. Sometimes in our life, there's a tension between comfort and aspiration. And what happens is we don't attempt things because we're too comfortable, we're too secure, and we don't want to sacrifice that to find our aspirations. And so it requires a little bit of bravery to attempt and go beyond the known to discover what more there may be.
So just to follow up on this, so how would I know that I've reached that purpose? You're saying happiness, is it? Like more percentage?
I think it's like asking, how will I know when I've eaten enough?
It's like every day. So eating is like, even if you do, if you made a mistake, for example, in observing whether you eaten enough or not that day, you have another chance next day. Yeah. But when you're talking about purpose, it's like, it's long journey to reach to that one point, and then it's not happening every day basically.
Yeah. I think also one thing I'd add to this is that purpose may not also be, it's not just the happiness when you find purpose, but it's the happiness knowing that you're moving towards your purpose. And perhaps that satisfaction is the most important satisfaction. To know that you're sincerely and progressively moving towards that purpose. And that sense of movement and progression, I think, is what ultimately brings that satisfaction to the heart. Because perhaps what can we say about purpose? Purpose is unlimited. Purpose is ever expanding. Do you ever fulfill your purpose? It's because once you've done one thing, it opens up another world. And when you've reached that, it opens up another world. And so I think it's just about being able to go to sleep at night saying, yes, I've moved forward towards my purpose. I've embraced everything I can do in order to find what I'm really meant to do. And if we can go to sleep saying that, I think we go to sleep feeling that contentment.
Thank you.
2 questions. You said you have read multiple books multiple times. Have you read books from other religions like Islam, Christianity, Judaism, and what you learned from those? That's one question. And the other question is, did you have had these kind of, they call experiences of beyond in your meditations? And how was that like?
Sure, thank you. The Vedic tradition has, or the ancient Sanskrit tradition, has a very interesting view on the philosophy and the varied theologies that we find in the world. What they essentially talk about is the idea of unity and diversity. That each religious or theological path, while varying in ritual, culture, expression, in essence, all talk about universal spiritual principles. And in that sense, the ancient Sanskrit literatures explain that there's a unity and diversity amongst the theologies and religious paths of this world. And so, when I was reading books from other traditions, then I was very much able to grasp those universal principles that every theology talks about. And therefore I found inspiration from many, many traditions. Even here today, I put up a quote by a Catholic monk, because I found it to be very profound and very much in line with the tradition that I myself pursue. And so I think the essence of religion is spiritual connection. And perhaps one of the disappointments of our world is that often we become so steeped in religious identification that we miss the spiritual unity and purpose that is universal amongst all of them. And so I think in my reading of different traditions, it just reinforced my conviction that there is ultimately a unity in diversity. And yes, we also do believe that amongst theologies there is an evolution of thought, and there is a kind of progression of ideas that are manifesting through the history of how religious traditions were taught. And that's also very, very interesting. But essentially, yes, my firm conviction also after meeting people from many different religions is that they're sincere spiritual practitioners in all these denominations. And therefore, there's definitely a unity in that diversity. And to your second question about mystical experiences and encounters with the divine, I think yes. I think we have all experienced that. One of our monks, he was once asked, "Have you ever seen the face of God?" And he said, "I don't know if I've seen the face of God, but I see the hand of God every day." And so encounters with divinity, I think for sure. We journal, and one of the things I mentioned in journaling was observations of divinity. When I became a monk, one of our teachers said to us that the goal of this spiritual path is not to believe in divinity. I was like, really? Did I join the wrong thing here? He said, no, the goal of this path is not to believe in divinity. So I said, then what is it? He said, the goal of this path is to empower you with the tools, practices, and processes by which you can perceive the presence of divinity at every moment. And I was like, okay, I think I'm in the right place. That sounds inspiring. I think spirituality in its essence is a science. In the world we're living in today, there's sometimes an aggressive demarcation between science and spirituality, that somehow science is in the objective realm and spirituality is somewhat of a subjective experience. However, I think from the spirituality that I've pursued and the spirituality that I've tried to live in my life, I very much see it as a science. When I read spiritual books, there's a hypothesis of life. And when I read spiritual books, there's an experiment that I can conduct. And when I read spiritual books, I perceive an observation that comes from those experiments that reinforces my conviction in the validity of that path. And so I think sometimes we can just see that spirituality is scientific, and scientific means it's experiential, and it's something to be directly perceived. We could say much more on this, but...
So we have a few questions online, just to give equal opportunity to them. We just have 10 minutes also.
So thank you. There are several reflections mentioned online. They've all mentioned they found your session very enlightening and insightful. So I'll combine questions in the interest of time. It is related to reflecting or introspecting, the very process of doing it. How does one stop overanalyzing situations while performing introspection? How much time should one dedicate for this? And how does one avoid spiraling from regrets while introspecting about the past?
Yeah, so I gave this framework to basically answer that very question. That when we're thinking or supposedly reflecting or supposedly introspecting, but we're just thinking about events and people without looking at it through a deeper lens, without trying to see the underlying lessons that I'm supposed to learn, then we can understand we're overthinking. When we're looking back in our life at what happened, but there's no action, there's no progressive movement forward from that. There's no ideas that we're drawing that are empowering our journey forward. We're overthinking. When we're just doing it in isolation without referencing or discussing with others, it sometimes can become our own echo chamber in our mind. And when it feels like it's negative, it's limiting, and it's stopping us from growing, then we can understand it's overthinking. So I think if we kind of just look at the effects of what that kind of thinking is doing, then we'll understand whether it's genuine introspection and reflection or not. And how much time one should spend, I think it's very individual. Different people's minds and different people's conscious self works in different ways. And so some people take periods of time where they just disconnect, and some people do a little bit every day. So I think it's a very individual, and one has to find their own way, which feels natural and progressive for them.
And how does one avoid spiraling down into regret because of being invested in the past?
I think we spiral down in regret when we don't have a plan for the future. When we look back, I think two things cause us to drown in regret. One is when we're not able to see the way forward. And the second thing is when we look back and haven't been able to draw something from that as a positive, as a learning, as an improvement for the future. When we look back in our life and we regret something, but we've learned something from it that's helping us now, then that regret doesn't drown us. And I think when we look back and we have regrets, but we know there's a progressive way forward, then we don't drown in that regret.
Thank you. And one more question is related to how to read. So in order to do spiral reading, do you read cover to cover, like end to end, or how does it work?
Keep turning the book around like. The first thing is read repeatedly. So that's what spiral reading is. Because when you read repeatedly and you get more familiar with the narrative, the immediate information, you can see deeper things. Like, for example, when you first began working at the Intel campus, you had to be very conscious about, how to make it to this particular room. But when you're familiar with the geography of this place, then it almost becomes second nature. And what happens is in the process, as you're walking to that place, you see like, oh, that was a beautiful flowers, and oh, that person's there, and you begin to see more things because you're not consciously having to focus on the journey. So one thing in spiral learning is just keep reading. I think the second thing in spiral reading is to see that this is not just information that I'm getting, but this is actually a message for me. You see, there's a different quality of reading or even listening. Like we could come to a lecture and we could think, now I'm going to get information. Or we could come to a lecture and we could be, now I'm going to hear a message that is going to empower my life going forward. And it's you'll have a very different experience according to your mindset. So when you read a book, and it's not just like, now I'm absorbing information, now I'm hearing a message that's meant for me, then that reading takes on a different quality. And I think the third thing in spiral reading is when we read, again, I keep saying this, with a view to apply, with a view to then asking ourselves the question, how does this change my life on Monday morning? And when we read with that kind of quality, then it's a deeper type of reading.
Thank you very much. And there is another interesting question on what are your greatest challenges as a monk and how did you grow through them?
Oh my God. People ask the biggest questions in the last 2 minutes of the talk. I think there have been many challenges. Perhaps the biggest challenge was that in order to follow my calling, I had to, many people were not happy with that. Many people had different ideas about what they thought I should be doing with my life. And many of those people were people who I had a very close relationship with. And perhaps this is an obstacle that all of us at some point in our life will have to face. The tension between pleasing people and finding our inner calling. And so over the years, I've learned how to navigate that tension and how to maintain relationships, but not at the expense of finding true authenticity. And that in itself could be a whole talk. But yeah, that's definitely one of the obstacles that I had to face and overcome.
Thank you very much. It has been enlightening to listen from you for many of us, including me. So I would request the audience to give a round of applause to our esteemed speaker.
Thank you so much. I know a few of you had your hands raised up. We'll have the speaker for next 15, 20 minutes. If you have questions, you can ask him in person.